This person didn't just break your heart. They changed the way you see people forever. And the hardest part is, before the betrayal, you trusted them with the softest parts of your soul. You still remember the version of yourself that existed before all of this happened. The version that laughed without overthinking. The version that believed loyalty was natural. The version that thought love alone was enough to keep someone honest. But betrayal has a strange psychology. It doesn't arrive looking like destruction. It arrives disguised as comfort, familiarity, promises, late-night conversations, and the feeling that you are finally safe with someone, and that's why it cuts so deeply. Because the pain was never just about losing a person. It was about losing the illusion you built around them. Some betrayals happen loudly, others happen silently, through distance, dishonesty, manipulation, or the terrifying realization that someone you would never hurt had no problem hurting you. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And maybe that's what betrayal really is. A collision between your sincerity and someone else's unresolved darkness. But here's the truth nobody tells you. The person who shattered your heart may also become the reason you finally wake up, because sometimes pain enters your life carrying a lesson your comfort could never teach. And tonight, we're going to uncover that lesson together. The deepest betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from the people whose voice once felt like home. There's something psychologically devastating about betrayal that most people never fully understand. Your mind is designed to protect you from danger. But when danger comes from a stranger, the brain reacts differently than when danger comes from someone you love. A stranger cannot truly destroy your emotional foundation, but someone you trusted can, because trust is not just emotional, it is neurological. Every time you opened your heart to this person, every secret you shared, every vulnerable moment you exposed, your brain slowly categorized them as safe. And once someone becomes emotionally safe in your mind, you stop guarding yourself around them. That's why betrayal feels like emotional death. The very person your nervous system learned to relax around suddenly became the source of your suffering. And maybe you noticed this after the heartbreak. You replayed every memory in your head trying to find the exact moment where everything changed. You questioned your instincts, your judgment, your worth. How did I not see it? But the terrifying truth is this: most betrayals are invisible in the beginning. Manipulative people rarely reveal themselves immediately. They study your kindness first. They learn your emotional patterns. They discover your fears, your insecurities, your need to be loved, and then slowly position themselves in the center of your emotional world. Not always out of evil. Sometimes out of emptiness, because wounded people often seek comfort from others while secretly lacking the emotional maturity to protect the hearts they are holding. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule." And heartbreak teaches you something painful about human nature. People are not always loyal to you. They are loyal to their needs. The moment their needs change, their behavior can change too. That realization destroys innocence. You begin remembering all the moments you ignored red flags because love made you hopeful. The excuses you made for them, the disrespect you minimized, the lies you convinced yourself were misunderstandings. Because when we love someone deeply, we often fall in love with their potential, not their reality. And that is where betrayal quietly begins, not in one massive moment, but in small moments of self-abandonment. You ignored your intuition to keep the connection alive. You silenced your boundaries to avoid losing them. You tolerated emotional confusion because you were attached to who they used to be, and slowly, you disappeared inside the relationship. This is why heartbreak changes people. Not because love failed them, but because betrayal forced them to confront a terrifying truth. Sometimes the person hurting you is the same person you keep running to for comfort. Psychologists call this trauma bonding. The mind becomes addicted to emotional inconsistency. One moment they give affection, the next moment they withdraw it, and your brain starts chasing their validation like survival itself. That's why letting go feels unbearable. You are not only grieving the person, you are grieving the emotional identity you built around them. But here is the lesson: betrayal begins teaching. Not everyone who enters your life deserves access to your soul. Some people arrive as blessings, others arrive as mirrors, and the ones who break your heart often reveal the parts of yourself you were neglecting the most. Your boundaries, your self-respect, your emotional dependence, your fear of abandonment. The betrayal was painful, but it exposed truths you could no longer afford to ignore, and in a strange way, that pain may become the beginning of your awakening. Sometimes the person who betrayed you walks away peacefully, while you stay behind fighting a war inside your own mind. That is the cruel psychology of heartbreak. The betrayal happens once, but the mind relives it 1,000 times. You wake up replaying conversations, analyzing tiny details, reading old messages like they contain hidden answers that will finally explain why someone who once loved you could suddenly become cold, distant, or dishonest. And somewhere during that process, something dangerous begins happening. You stop questioning their behavior and start questioning your own value. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I loved too much. Maybe I'm too emotional. This is where heartbreak becomes identity destruction, because betrayal has a way of making innocent people carry guilt that never belonged to them. Carl Jung believed that unresolved emotional wounds force people into deep self-confrontation, and betrayal does exactly that. It drags your insecurities to the surface, the fear of being abandoned, the fear of being replaced, the fear that no matter how deeply you love someone, it will never guarantee they stay. And suddenly, your confidence begins depending on someone who already broke your trust. That is why heartbreak feels humiliating. Not because you loved deeply, but because you gave someone emotional power over your self-worth. You begin comparing yourself to whoever came after you. You obsess over what they have that you don't. You stare at your reflection differently. And the terrifying part is, betrayal can make even strong people forget who they are. A person who was once confident becomes anxious. A person who was once warm becomes emotionally guarded. A person who once trusted easily now questions everyone's intentions. Pain changes perception. After betrayal, the world no longer feels emotionally safe. Even kindness starts looking suspicious. You overanalyze delayed replies. You become hyper-aware of emotional distance. You prepare for abandonment before it even happens. This is not weakness. It is the nervous system adapting to emotional shock. Your brain is trying to prevent future pain. But here's where many people become trapped. Instead of healing, they build emotional armor. They stop opening up, stop trusting, stop feeling. They tell themselves they are protecting their peace, but secretly they are protecting unresolved pain. And eventually, loneliness replaces heartbreak, because a closed heart may avoid betrayal. But it also avoids connection. Buddha once said, "Pain is certain, suffering is optional." The betrayal itself was painful, but the endless attachment to the wound is what slowly destroys people. Some individuals spend years emotionally chained to someone who left long ago, not because they still love them, but because they never rebuilt themselves after the damage, and this is the hidden lesson heartbreak tries to teach. Your identity cannot be built around another human being because people are unpredictable. Feelings change, promises break. Humans are imperfect. If your entire emotional world depends on one person staying the same forever, Eventually, life will shake that foundation. That's why betrayal, as painful as it is, can become a spiritual awakening. It forces you to meet yourself again. Not the version attached to validation, not the version desperate to be chosen, but the version of you underneath all the emotional dependency, the version that existed before the heartbreak. And maybe this is why some people emerge stronger after betrayal. Not because the pain disappeared, but because the pain finally taught them the difference between love and emotional attachment. Love does not beg for consistency. Love does not destroy your peace. Love does not make you abandon yourself to keep someone else. Real love expands you. Attachment consumes you. And heartbreak is often the brutal experience that teaches people the difference. One day you realize something shocking. The betrayal did not only reveal who they were, it revealed who you became while trying to keep them. That realization changes everything. Because healing truly begins the moment you stop asking, "Why did they hurt me?" and start asking, "Why did I ignore my own pain just to keep someone from leaving?" That question can transform an entire life. Sometimes the hardest person to walk away from is the person who already walked away from you emotionally long ago. That's the contradiction heartbreak creates. Your mind knows the truth, but your heart keeps negotiating with memories. You remember the way they looked at you in the beginning, the late-night conversations, the feeling of being understood, the small moments that once made life feel lighter. And even after the betrayal, your soul keeps returning to those memories like a starving person searching for warmth in a burned house. This is why letting go feels so brutal, because you are not only releasing a person, you are releasing a future you imagined with them, the trips you planned, the version of your life you pictured, the emotional certainty you thought would last forever. And when that future collapses, the brain reacts almost like grief after death. Psychologists discovered that emotional heartbreak activates many of the same neurological regions as physical pain. In other words, betrayal literally hurts, not metaphorically, biologically. That's why some nights feel unbearable. You sit alone in silence, but your chest feels heavy, like something inside you is collapsing. And strangely, the loneliness becomes addictive. You replay old memories because pain is still a form of connection. Even suffering can feel safer than emptiness. This is what many people misunderstand about attachment. Attachment is not always love. Sometimes attachment is emotional dependency mixed with fear. Fear of starting over. Fear of being alone. Fear that you will never feel that deeply again. And the human mind fears emotional uncertainty more than emotional pain. That is why people stay in toxic relationships longer than they should. Predictable pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." And heartbreak proves this perfectly. The more you resist the loss, the more power it gains over you. You stalk their social media hoping to feel closure. You imagine them missing you. You secretly hope they return so your suffering can finally feel justified. But closure rarely arrives from the people who broke you. Closure is an internal decision, a painful acceptance that some chapters end without explanation. And that acceptance feels terrifying because letting go forces you to face yourself without distraction. No more chasing, no more hoping, no more emotional bargaining, just you and the silence. And in that silence, something profound begins happening. You start seeing the relationship more clearly, not through the lens of longing, but through the lens of truth. You remember how anxious you became, how much emotional energy you spent trying to keep the connection alive, how often you abandoned your own needs to maintain temporary peace. And slowly, the illusion begins breaking. You realize you were fighting for potential, not reality, for who they could become, not who they consistently showed themselves to be. That realization is painful because it forces you to mourn two things at once: the person you lost and the fantasy you created around them. But this is also where healing quietly begins, because every heartbreak eventually reaches a turning point, a moment where exhaustion becomes wisdom. You become tired of chasing closure, tired of romanticizing pain, tired of shrinking yourself for someone emotionally unavailable, and suddenly your soul starts craving peace more than attachment. That is the moment your transformation starts. Not when the pain disappears, but when your desire for inner peace becomes stronger than your desire to hold on to someone who hurt you. Lao Tzu once wrote, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." And maybe that is the hidden purpose of heartbreak: to destroy the version of you that depended on external love to feel complete. Because eventually you understand something life-changing. Letting go is not losing someone. Sometimes it is finally choosing yourself, and the moment you truly choose yourself, the chains begin breaking. One day you stop missing them, and start missing the peace you lost while loving them. That realization changes everything, because the final lesson of betrayal is not about them anymore, it's about you. For a long time you probably believed the pain came from losing someone you loved. But eventually, if you sit with the silence long enough, another truth begins revealing itself. The suffering was not only caused by their betrayal, it was also caused by the way you abandoned yourself, trying to keep them. That is the hardest lesson. Not everyone loses themselves loudly. Some people lose themselves quietly, by tolerating disrespect, by suppressing emotions, by accepting less than they deserve because they fear loneliness more than unhappiness. And maybe that's why betrayal becomes such a brutal teacher. It forces you to confront the places where you betrayed yourself first, the moments your intuition warned you, the nights your heart felt uneasy, the boundaries you wanted to set but didn't. Deep down, part of you always knew, but love has a strange way of making people negotiate with reality, especially when they are emotionally attached to an illusion. Albert Camus once wrote, "In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer." And heartbreak is often the winter that reveals your hidden strength. Not immediately. At first, betrayal destroys you. You lose sleep, lose clarity, lose emotional stability. Some days you barely recognize yourself, but pain does something comfort never can. It exposes truth. You begin seeing patterns more clearly, not only in others, but in yourself. You notice how often you sought validation from emotionally unavailable people, how often you confused intensity with love, how often you ignored inner peace for temporary emotional highs. And slowly, wisdom is born from suffering. This is why some people become profoundly different after betrayal, not colder, not bitter, but more conscious. They stop chasing people who send mixed signals. They stop romanticizing inconsistency. They stop begging for the bare minimum, because heartbreak teaches what self-respect truly costs. And once you learn that lesson deeply, your entire energy changes. You no longer fear being alone the same way, because solitude becomes less painful than emotional chaos. You realize something powerful. The wrong connection can drain your spirit more than loneliness ever could. And maybe this is what philosophers meant when they spoke about awakening, not some mystical transformation, but the painful moment a person finally sees reality without emotional denial. You stop asking for love from people incapable of giving it. You stop trying to heal others while neglecting yourself. You stop measuring your worth by who chooses to stay, and that is freedom. Real freedom, not freedom from pain, but freedom from attachment to what continuously destroys your peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. At first, those words sound cold, but after heartbreak, they become survival, because betrayal teaches one final truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You cannot control who hurts you, but you can control who continues having access to your soul. And perhaps this entire painful experience entered your life for that reason alone. Not to break you permanently, but to awaken boundaries where there were none, wisdom where there was innocence, self-respect where there was emotional dependency. The person who betrayed you may never fully understand the damage they caused. Some people move on without reflection, without accountability, without ever realizing how deeply they changed another human being. But your healing was never meant to depend on their understanding. Your healing begins the moment you stop waiting for justice from the people who wounded you and start rebuilding the relationship you have with yourself. Because in the end, betrayal reveals something terrifying, yet beautiful. The heart can break completely and still learn how to love life again, not blindly this time, not desperately, but wisely. And maybe that is the true lesson hidden inside heartbreak. The person who broke your heart did not only teach you about betrayal, they taught you the importance of never betraying yourself again. If this story touched something inside you, maybe it's because a part of your soul is still carrying pain it never fully spoke about. But remember this: your heartbreak was not proof that you were unlovable. It was proof that you loved deeply in a world where not everyone knows how to handle sincere hearts. Do not let betrayal convince you to become emotionally numb. The goal is not to stop loving. The goal is to love without abandoning yourself. Because one day, someone will enter your life who does not confuse your softness for weakness. Someone who values honesty the way you do. Someone who brings peace instead of confusion. And when that day comes, you will realize this painful chapter was not the end of your story. It was the moment your awakening began. So heal slowly. Forgive yourself for what you tolerated. And never forget, sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the same people who unknowingly force us to become who we were always meant to be.